us that right. We consider it sacred. But we are disenfranchising whole communities in my country. Because we have so many states that say if you've ever been convicted of a felony, you can never vote again. Because we've upgraded almost all drug violations to felonies. Because we are imprisoning black men at a per capita rate 7 to 8 times the rate of white men. Because of all that, 14.5% of all the black men in my country will never vote again. And in our former president's home state, George W. Bush of Texas, and his brother's home state, where he was governor in Florida, it's 31%. Now, I would suggest to you folks that you remember the vote of 2000, when there was a little question about who won. And they said this was a problem with hanging chads on the. I would suggest to you that this has a lot more to do with that vote than the hanging chads ever would. 31% of all the black people in Florida could never vote on it. I told you how punitive we are. 1,009 people per 100,000 population in prison. That's bad enough, but when you break this down by race and gender, it gets mind-boggling. We imprison white men in my country at the rate of 943 per 100,000. Before I tell you how many black men we imprison there, let me suggest to you, under the most racist regime in modern history, that would be the apartheid government of South Africa, 1993, before it fell, they were imprisoning their black men at the rate of 851 per 100,000. In the United States, in 2008, under our Prohibition government, we imprisoned black men at the rate of 6,667 per 100,000. Now, how anybody could look at this one statistic and not see institutionalized racism in the implementation of our drug laws, I don't know. At LEAP, we believe to have a more racist policy, you'd have to literally go back to slavery. We have more black men in prison today in the United States than we had slaves in 1840. And they're doing exactly the same work. They're working for corporations, and they're getting paid 16 to 20 cents an hour. Certainly no overtime, no vacations, no benefits, no. How can legitimate businesses possibly compete with this? It's impossible. So this has become a prison industrialized system. And it's about the only place that we produce anything. Iraq, every one of them is made in a prison. People that want to wear some sexy clothes, Victoria's Secret, all that stuff is made in prisons. And it's a long line of corporations that are living off of this. What are the outcomes of legalization under this policy? Well, the first outcome is we wouldn't have to arrest 1.9 million people in my country next year, which would mean something very significant monetarily to all of us in my country, because we spend $70 billion to do that. LEAP commissioned a study with Harvard School of Economics that was published December 5th of last year to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the end of alcohol prohibition. We asked them to do a study that would show one thing, that would show how much money the United States Treasury would realize if we were to legalize all drugs, regulate them, and just tax them at the rate of alcohol or tobacco. And he said $76.8 billion a year would be realized. That's not chicken feed, that's a lot of money. So this is just a 4-step program, and we'll be done with it, and I'll go to questions. First step is to legalize these drugs. Second step is to have the federal government produce the drugs. What's the outcomes of that? Well, you have standardized measurements, production consistency in these stuff, which means one thing, it means we can end overdose deaths. The third point is, how are we going to distribute these drugs? You got to remember the LEAP, we cross the entire political spectrum. We've got people as far to the right as you can get, is like the Nobel economist Milton Friedman was a member of LEAP before he died. You go over to the left, and William F. Buckley Jr. and George Shultz, former Secretary of State under Reagan.
Noam Chomsky.
Pardon?
Noam Chomsky is.
Yes, I was just going to go. When you go to the left side, we've got Noam Chomsky as a member. Howard Zinn was a member before he died. Barbara Ehrenreich. It's across the entire political spectrum. Anybody that's thinking understands this is a problem that we have to end. So, because we're across the whole political spectrum, we allow our speakers, we've got 100 speakers, to suggest any way of distributing this that they think would reduce death, disease, crime, or addiction. And a lot of our speakers suggest that the way this should be done is to sell these drugs only to adults from like state package stores, which we have for some of our alcohol stuff in some of the states. No advertising whatsoever, no branding on the package so that nobody could say my stuff is better than your stuff, but every package would be labeled with the consistency, with what the potency of the drug is and what's in that package, including if it's cannabis, it would have the THC rating on it and the cannabinoids rating so that people who take this for medicine, sometimes less THC is better for them. Sometimes more THC is better for them. And same with the cannabinoids. It depends on what illness they're taking it for. But it would all be on the package. I don't like that idea myself. And then the last part of it is tax the heck out of it and use those taxes for good works. I don't like that ending there. The reason I don't like that ending is because when I was a young trooper, we had a problem with the numbers racket. The numbers racket was a thing where a 3-digit number came out at 5 o'clock every afternoon, and if you bet on that number, you won. And when I was a young cop, we were out on the streets arresting numbers runners every day. And they were always people that were maybe 85 years old or older, old men, or young, very young men, 13, 14, 15 years old. No matter how many of them we arrested, the next day there were more of them out there. It's sort of like what we're doing with drugs. And then one morning I woke up, and it was like magic. All the numbers runners had apparently packed their bags and left the state the night before. And interestingly enough, that coincided exactly with the day that we created the state lottery. So what we'd done is we had co-opted their jobs, right? And that worked really well for a few years because we took half of that money to pay the winnings and run the administrations, and the other half went right in our education fund to pay for new schools, to pay salaries for educators. It was wonderful. And then some brilliant guy down at Trenton State House said, you know, we're making a lot of money off this, but we could make even more money if we put some of the profits of this into systems where we could advertise in magazines and on television, show how wonderful it is to win $1 million, you know. So what is the government doing? They're addicting people to gambling so they can make a profit. And in my cynical mind, I have no doubt that if we could make a profit off of drugs, we'd be addicting people to drugs for the same reason. So I would like to do something different, a little different. I would distribute free maintenance doses of drugs to any adult requesting them. And the key word here is free. And the reason is I want to take the profit motive out of this for everybody, including the government. I know this sounds